Please welcome Brent Allen Winters.
He who never quotes is never quoted. That's a quote. When Homer spoke his lute lyre, he'd heard men sing by land and sea, and what the thought he might require, he went and took, same as me. The market girls and fishermen, the shepherds, and the sailors too, they heard old songs turn up again, but kept it quiet, same as you. They knew he stole, and he knew they know, but they didn't tell or make a fuss, but winked at Homer down the road, and he winked back, same as us. Nothing that's been worthwhile among the race of Adam has happened except somebody or some small combination of bodies look back into the past to something that had been forgotten, otherwise relegated to the dustbin of history, and they revived it in first principle and reapplied it to new facts. Let's try another quote. I had 6 faithful friends. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what, and how, and why, and when, and where, and who. They follow me o'er land and sea. Everywhere I go, I take my 6 faithful friends with me. They teach me everything I know. What is our common law? People struggle over that for centuries, trying to define it with words. Our common law is only known in adversity. It's only known as it is compared to its great antagonist, the law of the city, the civil law that covers our entire globe. Almost every country, except a handful of common law countries, covers it under different labels and different names. But it is our common law that brings us our liberties. No question about that. It is not a list of laws. Our common law is a law of process. It is a way. W-A-Y. No, I'm not the first person to have said that. Common lawyers through the centuries have pointed that out. Even the Constitution of the United States, Article 6, what lawyers call the supremacy clause, it says this shall be the supreme law of the land. What? Well, the process is herein described. Not stressing what is to be done, but stressing how it is to be done. Matter of fact, due process, of course, the Constitution says this too, it is the most fundamental of all rights. And the Supreme Court has said over and over again, we can't define it until the problem arises that shows us we need it. How things are to be done. That's the definition of our common law more than anything else. That's what our common law is. What? How? How do we recognize it? We can recognize our common law because our common law is a law of relationships. Relationships. Our common law seeks to maintain and establish lawful relationships. The law of the city, by contrast, seeks to achieve the will of the powerful party. All in that unforgettable phrase of William Tyndale, in his translation of the Bible for the first time from the Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic text, Romans 13, he calls it the powers that be. That's the goal of the law of the city, to achieve the will of the state. The goal of the law of the land, the common law, achieve due process, let the chips fall where they may. That's what our common law, that's how it's recognized, and that's what it is, being a law of process. Relationships. Secondly, our common law is recognized because it is a law of fact. We say in America we have lawsuits. No, we don't. I don't know why we say that, but it's just stuck with us for so long. We have fact suits. We don't ask the jury what the law is. Frankly, the jury doesn't care. We ask the jury to tell us what happened, who done it, why did they do it, with what did they do it, and for what reason did they do it. That law of fact, founded upon fact. You say, well, does reason matter? Of course reason matters. But as Professor Merriman said from Bolt Hall over in Berkeley, he said where reason comes to dominate, when logic becomes the thing that's stressed, somehow facts have the way of receding from consideration. Listen, horses are born to run. I'm quoting again. Birds are born to fly. Beasts of prey are born to ferocity. Hounds are born to hunt. But man, he's born to think. You say, well, we must train men to think. Well, maybe that wouldn't hurt, but the truth is, when the noose is around your neck, when it's your ox that gets gored, when it's your life, liberty, or property, or any combination thereof that's at risk, your mind will work well. It'll be like a steel trap. I've seen that happen over and over again. I expect you probably have too. Reason's important, but men can reason. Given the facts, they'll figure it out. I was at a courthouse, county courthouse, Boone County, Missouri. Beautiful courthouse, little tiny courthouse, has a solid copper top, well, covered with copper. They keep it shiny real nice. I was in that hallway in the middle of the courthouse. I overheard one of the defense lawyers say to his client, they were arguing. He said, I don't care about the law. Give me the facts. I can win on the facts. And it's the facts that are hidden. And it's hard to get them to bob forward from the flux of human relationships. But you establish what the relationship is first. And by the way, the story is told about relationships, that our common law is about relationships. When you go to the digest, we don't have them on paper like we used to. They're mostly on the internet. We used to have a set of volumes, over 60, AMS or American jurisprudence. I look on the bindings of those volumes in alphabetical order. I don't find subjects. I find this, the relationships in alphabetical order. Husband and wife, parent and child, lessor, lessee, trustor, trustee, promisor, promisee. Everything's organized. Common law organizes it according to relationship. The civil law is a few short volumes of code. It will say contracts, doesn't say promise or promisee, because relationships don't matter. What matters? The will of the power of the party, the powers that be, must be achieved at all costs. By the way, that's dangerous. You know why? It's dangerous for this reason. If the result is what we're driving at, and we're not concentrating on the process, let the chips fall where they may out here, then all of a sudden, at some point, the ends will justify the means. And where the ends justify the means, there's tyranny. And individual rights are viewed. But where you concentrate on the process, that tends to lessen that problem. Oh, I know, there's always problems. I'm not under any delusions about juries getting stacked and judges that are biased and powerful people getting people in prosecution, criminal prosecution, simply because they know somebody. I know. And I know that men at their best, as Ryle said, are only men at best. And that ain't saying much. But if we have the forms in place, trial by jury, I've seen it happen even when the jury is stacked. I've seen them come out right because one person's jury is not a majority institution. It's not representative Because the common law, the law of the land, is process. The law of the city that covers all of the globe except a handful of common law countries, a principle and not a name. The law of the city says it's a complete defense to any crime that you obey the government. I used to struggle to try to find a way to get into the office of William Franklin Pratchett, prosecutor of Nuremberg. He's gone now. And anything to listen to him talk. He told me the first question they had to answer at Nuremberg at the war crime trials for the Nazis. They had to decide whether they were going to prosecute the Nazis under the law of France and Germany and Italy and Norway and all of Japan, as my father used to say, or South America. Or are we going to prosecute the Nazis under our common law? Well, they finally decided they were going to prosecute the Nazis under the common law because if they had prosecuted them under the law of the city, they wouldn't have gotten a conviction for any of them. Why? Because it is a complete, watch my words, a complete defense to any crime that you obey the government. It's true in most of the world. It's not true here. General Marshall said when our boys are tried for war crimes, obedience can be a mitigating factor, but it cannot be the exonerating factor. That's what General Marshall said. Well, he was right. That's the way it is in America. Even our military men, it kind of spills over into our military life, our common law. It says when they take their oath, they will obey all law orders. I discovered when I was a young fellow overseas, for people from other countries, and they've taken oaths to emperors and empresses, people in other military organizations. I didn't do that. I didn't know what I was doing when I did it. I took an oath to some things written on a piece of paper. By the way, nothing new about that piece of paper called the Constitution. It was something, an attempt to reach back, as we said at the beginning, and establish something very old, something that had been forgotten. As Justice James Wilson of the United States Supreme Court said, to reach back before Magna Carta and establish what had been lost. Individual liberty. We are more English than the English, he said. In that respect, we are. I understand what he was driving at. What, how, why, when? When is it most important? When is our common law most at risk of being extinct or being whittled away at? When there's crisis. That's when. Crisis. War is crisis. Well, necessity. That's the word that Pitt used. Necessity is the plea of every infringement of human liberty. We must take you and put you in prison. Why? You look Japanese. That's what happens when there's necessity. Necessity says banks are too big to fail, and if they're too big to fail, they're too big to the bankers to jail. Necessity. We must do away with justice. It won't work, friends, neighbors, and relatives. In the long run, you lose. How? What? Why? When? Where? Where is our common law to be rescued, if it need be, from extinction right here, right now? That famous oath that we talk about, that every office holder in America, state and federal, takes, according to the supremacy clause of our Constitution, Article 6, that they will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign, that means by force of arms if necessary. Defense by force of arms. Second, against all enemies domestic. That means, and that's an ancient common law oath, that means that you're willing to go serve on the jury. You're willing to do your duty. And you're willing to pick up the authority that you have as a member of the jury and either say yes to the government or say no. Yes, you may take this person's life, liberty, property, or a combination thereof. Or no, you may not, whether you're on a grand jury or whether you're on the pettit jury, the trial jury. That's where, domestically, is my point, and that's the oath. And by the way, that oath does not add any duty to our elected officials. It doesn't bind them to any new duty, I should say. But additionally, and its terms. In those terms are wound up and bound up the vaults of all that they pray for our common law. Our Constitution does not describe trial by jury and all the things it brings in, because people at that time understood that means by peers. That means peers are not equals either. They are those you are paired with, neighbors, the ones that understand you. And according to the law of the land, it says lex terra. That phrase in Article 6 is lifted right out of the United States Constitution. How, what, why, when, where, who. Men and women of conviction. That's who. Men and women of conviction. A young judge was looking for someone who would explain to him what had motivated these beleaguered, ill-fed, ill-equipped, ill-trained colonists to challenge the most powerful, best-fed, best-equipped armed forces the world had ever known. This young judge, in the year 1842, he was 42 years old that year. This fellow, he found him, his name was Captain Preston, and he said this: "Were you oppressed by intolerable oppressions?" He said, "Oppressions? I didn't feel any." He was 92 years old. He said, "Well, what about the tea tax?" He said, "Tea tax? I never drank a drop of this stuff. The boys threw it all overboard." He said, "Well, I suppose you've been reading Harrington or Sidney and Locke about the eternal principles of liberty." He said, "Never heard of it." He said, "We read only the Bible, the Catechism, Watts, Psalms, and hymns, and the almanac." He said, "Well, what was the matter then? What did you mean going to the fight?" He said, "Young man, what we meant in going to the